Welcome, friends. Thank you once again for joining me for a chilled review. In this video, we are going to look at the PEAVEY VYPYR X budget amplifier. I have been looking at budget amplifiers for a little while now. Some of you may even remember late last year we reviewed the Line 6 Catalyst, which was a modeling amplifier that claimed to be able to do most of what you need for a very reasonable price in an amplifier. That video seemed to generate quite a lot of buzz. There's certainly been a lot of views and we've had a lot of back and forth in the comments regarding that amplifier. Ultimately, I felt like the Catalyst was a bit of a letdown. Certainly it did not deliver on many of the things it promised, and it was lacking in basic features that I kind of feel like should be a standard for 2023. So when looking at this PEAVEY VYPYR amplifier, this amplifier actually launched around the same time as the Line 6 Catalyst, although for some reason nobody really seems to have paid that much attention to it, which is surprising to me because on paper what this thing promises to do is very comprehensive, certainly better than what the Line 6 Catalyst is capable of doing. A huge feature set, plenty of amps, effects, models, wireless app capability, and all under that very well-known and well-loved brand of PEAVEY that you associate with some of the most famous guitar tones of all time, not least of which is Mr. Van Halen. So on the specs page, this amp promises a hell of a lot. Now, does it deliver? Well, let me take you through the good, the bad, and the broken of the PEAVEY VYPYR X. Now this particular unit I've got in for review is the X2. There are three versions of this amplifier. This amplifier, the X2, this is priced around the £250 price point. So to me, this 60 watt combo is the exact direct competitor to that Line 6 Catalyst that I reviewed last year. Now look, first and foremost, the most important thing you are here to find out is, does this thing sound any good? I'm very pleased to say that how it sounds is going to come under the good bracket for me. There's a large selection of modeled amplified sounds with this thing, including some really popular classic PEAVEY models, the 6505 for example. The XXX is a seriously underrated PEAVEY amplifier that I enjoy. For clean and breakup stuff, you have the usual Fender Twin, Buddha, you have something roughly based on a Marshall amplifier. So first of all, there's a good selection of amp models in there. Second of all, they do all sound pretty good. Don't get me wrong, none of these are going to trouble your Kemper or your Axe-FX or your Neural DSP. These are not first class modeled amp sounds, okay? But for 250 quid, they are more than serviceable. Are extremely pleasant on this amplifier. The effects quality, whilst not really that customizable, is again very serviceable. There's some nice rotary vibe kind of speaker effects in there that I used on my clean sounds instead of a chorus that I really enjoyed. This amplifier does feature both an auxiliary in and a headphone out. You can also plug this in via USB and use it as an audio interface. However, what kind of annoys me is that if you do use this as an audio interface or you run something out of the headphone out jack, it disables the built-in speaker and there is no way of turning it back on. That is something you could do with the Line 6 Catalyst, although the implementation wasn't great. The only thing about the way this thing sounds that is going to have to go under the bad column for me is that there are features that this amp is capable of that you are not able to use unless you buy an optional foot switch. That foot switch is called the Sandpera and it costs almost as much as this amplifier again. That foot switch unlocks things such as a looper, it extends the number of presets you can use, it makes the wah customizable. It's a little bit annoying to see indicator lights and labels for the looper on the front of this amp. When I got it out of the box, I was like, oh wow, it has a looper, and then I was like, oh actually no it doesn't, not unless you spend another 200 odd quid on a foot switch. One of the major gripes I had with the Line 6 Catalyst was that a lot of the functionality was not accessible from the built-in controls on the amplifier. I'm very happy to say that, foot switch expansion aside, everything that this can do out of the box is fully accessible from the rotary controls on the top of the amplifier. And furthermore, I'm really happy to see there are indicator LED lights for every single pot on this, which shows you where you've saved your various amp settings. It shows you where reverbs are set, where delays are set. And a special mention must go to the built-in tuner on this amplifier. I really wasn't expecting much. However, I was really pleased to see that this tuner supports everything down to bass guitar frequencies. I was able to plug in my 7-string tuned to drop A and it had no problem at all tuning that. When you pluck a string, it correctly identifies the note being played on one of the rotary lights, and then on the light next to it, you use that to do the fine tuning. This is a far better tuner than I expected to find in a budget combo amplifier. Stick that tuner in the good column. Now, in the opposing bad column, if, for example, you want to change some of the settings of a chorus effect that you've got up front, it's really unintuitive, and that goes for every single one of the stomp box effects that you can use with this amp. All you get to customize the effects is 2 knobs, one called P1, one called P2. It doesn't tell you what they do, you have to guess. In fact, the only way to find out what P1 and P2 does is to pull the user manual out of the box and find the page with it on where it tells you. And this goes for everything, for the chorus, for the compressor, for the fuzz pedals. There's a P1, there's a P2, they're not labeled, you have to find out what they do. Would it really have been so hard in the app to just tell me what this knob is doing that I'm turning? Now, wireless app, I hear you cry. I was overjoyed to find that this thing has fully wireless editing and operation right out of the box. There's no proprietary cables needed, there's no faffing around like there was with the Line 6 Catalyst with running your USB into your iPod or into a PC or anything like that. There's both an iOS and an Android app. Fantastic to see that, especially in a budget amplifier. One of the major things I didn't like about the Line 6 Catalyst was the fact it didn't have any wireless functionality at all, despite the fact this is 2023. I mean, even my light bulbs are wireless. You can use this app to cycle through all the various amp models, the various effects. It's a really nice, intuitive way to play around with sounds, especially using something like an iPad, like I have been doing here. That's not to say the app is perfect. It did lose connection and freeze on me a couple of times. I have not been able to save any presets using the app so far. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I've been through the user manual. I press save, nothing happens. which is kind of annoying because I hope to use the app to save presets and share them with you guys, but I just haven't been able to get it working. Now you are just stuck with that app if you want to do any editing or creating of rigs away from the unit itself. There is no PC editor available for this at the moment, which is a bit of a shame because I know from the comments, a lot of you guys out there, that's the main way you build rigs on all of your modeling products. So whilst it's great, this thing has an app that is pretty fully featured. You can even play backing tracks over Bluetooth audio with it and play along to them through the amp. It's definitely buggy, it's definitely underdeveloped in some aspects, and I wouldn't rely on it for anything other than just noodling at home. So I've really enjoyed the sounds. The app is a fantastic addition, I'm really happy to see. You can do pretty much everything you need to do from the built-in controls on the amplifier, which is brilliant. However, the biggest thing that has driven me nuts about this amp is the fact that you have all these effects built in. You have 20 or 30 amp models, something like that. You have presets, you have wireless editing, you have all these features, and yet there is no built-in noise gate. There is no stomp box version of a noise gate. There is no noise gate built into the input of the amplifier. And you guys may be wondering why that's such a big deal. Well, for somebody like myself who plays a lot of metal, I write mostly metal, I play 7-string guitars, the lack of a noise gate effectively means you cannot use any of the overdrives and especially not the tube screamer with any of the high gain amp models. It is just so fucking noisy, like even at the lowest possible volumes. Even with playing guitars with active pickups like I am here that are effectively noiseless, you just cannot use the tube screamer. It's just so noisy, it feeds back like hell. What's weird is that there does appear to be some type of built-in gating happening with this amp. If you just sit here and let it kind of hiss for a little while, it will eventually kill it. So there's definitely something going on with this, like an auto gate or a squelch feature or something like that. So clearly this amp could have a noise gate built into it. The fact it's from PEAVEY, who are a legendary high gain amp manufacturer, and it doesn't have a noise gate for all those big saturated high gain sounds, it's just bizarre. And it's so frustrating because I can tell that some of the high gain models in this, such as the XXX or the 6534, they sound great with that tube screamer enabled, but it's just unusable because of all the feedback and the noise. This amplifier has a whole bunch of gimmicks, in my opinion, built into it. You can mimic the sound of a sitar, you can mimic the sound of a bass guitar with your guitar signal or a 12-string guitar. All these weird, wacky and wonderful gimmicky things, but there's no noise gate, which you badly need if you want to play full-on metal through this thing. This being an amplifier that uses modeled digital amplifier sounds, I have to say there is an amount of noticeable latency. Nothing horrific unless you really start pushing it with the pitch shifters and the various digital instruments in here. But to play, this thing feels like a modeler. This does not feel like a valve amp. I feel like I should just make that clear. So, I have enjoyed predominantly most of the time I've spent playing through this amplifier. And I know that there's a bunch of you that subscribe to the channel for which this would be a very enticing product. I know there's some more mature guitarists who watch me who don't want to piss around with modeling kit, FRFRs, editing software, like all that kind of thing. You just want to plug into an amp, get a good sound and have a jam basically. Now I wouldn't say to write this amplifier off. What I would say is do not see this as a fully featured modeling amplifier that you can wirelessly do all sorts of fancy wonderful things on. See this as purely a nice little home amp you can plug into, flick a couple of presets on, and you've got a decent enough sound to just have a jam on. The app for me, whilst it's usable, is still just too buggy really to rely on. I would say do budget to get yourself a noise gate pedal with this amplifier. It's really, really loud for 60 watts, which is great, but by the same token, it's extremely noisy. Don't even think about using the Tube Screamer or any of the overdrives without a noise gate because you're going to be swimming in feedback. I can't really say I would recommend this for recording because the USB out and the headphone out, they have a fixed cab and mic sim built into them, which is okay, but you can't change any of it. You can't change the simulated microphone, the simulated cab, you can't use your own IRs. Don't buy this for recording. Buy this knowing what you're getting into and knowing what this thing does well, which is, it's a great home amplifier. Plug it in. At the end of the day, if you want to just have a nice noodle, you'll get a reasonably good metal sound, a reasonably good clean sound out of it. It does that job extremely well. Forget about all this other fancy gimmicky stuff that it claims to do, but just does not do particularly well. Are there any PEAVEY VYPYR users watching the video? If there are, I'd be really keen to hear what your experiences have been. How have you managed the noise with this thing? Have you had more luck with the wireless app than I've had? Do let me know in the comments below. If you've got this far, thank you so much for watching one of my chilled reviews. Please do support me by liking this video and subscribing to the channel because it really encourages me to keep grinding away at making content for you guys. Better yet, you can do the kindness of buying me a coffee via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Any financial support, no matter how small, is greatly received and really appreciated. Until the next chilled review, do take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.